Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Before we get into the video, I did want to give a quick shout out to the sponsor, Dueling Guard. They have mats, deck boxes, bags, everything you can think of for TCG apparel. Check them out in the description box down below and use code SACCO for 5% off. Hey guys, Lucas Sacco here. Today I'm bringing you guys something for the future format. This is for the December format after all of the Risol and Malice stuff comes out. I wanted to do a tier list for you guys. That way you can get some idea on how I'm thinking about how the meta is going to pan out. And that may influence you guys on cards you want to pick up, how you want to build your decks, and things like that. Then I'm going to remind you guys that I'm going to have videos coming out later this week, both for Malice and Risol, just showing off the decks again. And then on Friday is when we're going to drop the spreadsheet for both of those. Let's just get straight into the tier list here. That way I'm not wasting your guys' time. I want to start off with Centurion. This is a deck that received a lot of hype in this current format. And I think that the reason it received hype at the beginning was how well this deck played through things like Dimensional Shifter, Floowandereeze, and Purrely. And it does play through all of those cards very well. But one thing to keep in mind is that next format, we're going to see a lot less Shifter getting played, just because the two best decks, in my opinion, will be Risol and Malice. And I'll explain those when I get to them. But both those decks play through Shifter very, very well. Malice will be maining Shifter at the start of the format, at least I think. But they play through Shifter really well. And so I think that other decks like Tenpai will start to see a decrease in play in Shifter. And because of that, Centurion loses some of its advantages that it has. Not to mention, this deck is just kind of weak to hand traps. And those are something we're going to see a lot of in both decks. The Malice deck can play upwards of like 18 hand traps. And that's with Bestials in the main deck, which also hit the Centurion deck. So I'd be very cautious of that. And the Risol deck can play like 22 hand traps very easily. So I'm going to put this deck down here in like tier 2, tier 3. It's definitely not one of the better decks going in the next format. It's a playable deck for sure, but definitely not one of the better ones. Fire King. This is one of the top 3 decks of the current format. The only problem with Fire King is it does have some major issues now. And going on to the next format where the decks get better, it's going to see a major decrease in play there. Like, the main thing is, like, you're going to look at your hand for a Fire King. You're going to see 2 fat chickens, a card that doesn't do anything, a brick, and, like, maybe 1 hand trap. And that's, like, an average hand for the deck, to be honest, right? So this deck definitely has its drawbacks. I think it's still very playable. It just definitely doesn't outpower the decks that are coming out in the future format. And it also has kind of a tough time into the Risol board. You're never going to be able to resolve the field spell effect when they have a detonator on the field. And so having something that's applying pressure to like your secondary engine is going to be kind of hard to get your Fire King cards resolved. And when you're not playing with the Fire King cards and getting them to resolve, you're basically just playing pure Snake Eye, which is not fantastic. Floowandereeze, you can stick this back in your binder. This deck's terrible. It's been terrible since it dropped in December of 2022 or wherever it came out. It's just such a low ceiling deck. It doesn't have that much potential. Its biggest factor is that it can play Shifter, but as we talked about with the other decks, Shifter doesn't really do all that much right now. Right, and then this is the Fiend Smith Kashtira deck. If you guys can see it down there in the bottom right. But this Fiend Smith deck is something that Pack and Joshua Schmidt both played at the YCS Bologna that was this weekend. And they both did very well, to be honest. The deck performed very well, I should say. But the main purpose of the deck is just to use the Kashtira cards to generate a little bit of advantage, to access the Fiend Smith cards, and the Fiend Smith cards will carry you through the rest of the game. Having the nice interaction of Desiree being able to recur every single turn, as well as being a very hard card to out, and it doing a lot of damage on its own because of the new Link 3 monster. I think this deck has some potential. I think it'll fall out in the next format just because we're not super worried about getting hand trapped anymore with the Risol deck. That deck eats hand traps very, very well. And if you can get to Detonator, you should be winning like most matches. So I'm going to put this deck down here probably in the same situation as Centurion. I think it kind of has both those features that Centurion is like losing its value for, and that's coming into effect for the Fiend Smith Cir deck as well. So a lot of you guys don't know what this deck here is. This is the Goblin Biker deck. It's received like random support along the past couple of sets. People think this deck will be very good because it has some neat interaction. And the fact that a lot of its extenders can detach from an Xyz monster on the field, including your opponent's field, to summon themselves. And so being able to like slowly eat away the detonator as you're doing your combo seems good. My issue with it is that it doesn't do enough. The Goblin Biker cards are just generically like not that good. They don't provide too many disruptions. They don't provide too many extenders. They don't provide too many combo starters even. And like honestly, the deck just doesn't do enough. So I would say put this back in your binder or sell it to your locals at like 10%. That's probably the best value you're going to get on it. Labyrinth. I think this deck is really good looking in the next format. I think this deck is super, super cool. The biggest factor for this is that it plays D-Barrier, a searchable D-Barrier that you can use the same turn you have access to it. And so that's one major thing I would keep in mind when choosing your deck this format. If you're a big fan of Labyrinth, this could be the deck to play for you, just because it does have that matchup like advantage into Risol. Another thing with this deck is that it has really good recursion. That's what you're going to find yourself into in a lot of games of this format from what I've seen in testing. If you do play against the Risol deck, it's going to be a grind game no matter what matchup you're playing. And so having something that has good recursive grind game, even if you can't floodgate him out of the game, is really, really good. Moving on into Voiceless Voice. This has seen a little tiny itsy bitsy bit of play in the OCG for like a 2-3 week period when the Malice monster or the Risol monsters were starting to see like more play. And what they were doing is they were basically using the Voiceless engine to just add a negate to the field to help protect Detonator from board breakers. I really don't think that's a good idea over here. If we're going to do that, we'll just play Judgment. I don't think that the Voiceless cards really do enough for you even. I think this is maybe Rogue at best, and it really just depends on if you win the die roll. Because if you do lose the die roll with a Voiceless Voice in this next format, you are cooked. It's instantly over. You go normal low effect, your Detonator it just gets popped, right? You place the continuous spell, you continuous spell effect to search, popped. There goes your whole engine. Your deck is done, you know. So I definitely put this down in Rogue. Definitely nothing better. All right, Malice. I'm really excited about this deck. Some people are rating this deck a little bit low because it does have some major lose conditions. The same thing that Risol has. Same thing that every deck has in every format, right? There's always going to be one random card that's really good against your deck, right? For Risol, it's D-Barrier. For Malice, it's Lancia. It just is what it is. It's a floodgate that your opponent can have access to, and it really does just shut down your turn. There are some things you can do in Malice to help play around those, though. And really just knowing the game plan going into it is going to be very advantageous for you. The only thing that I think that like pushes Malice down on the tier list and makes it not even with Risol is its ability to go second for one. Because Malice, even though it has the trap cards, you're not always going to draw them, and you definitely don't want to play more copies of them. So it does kind of feel like you're bluffing a lot going second by like starting off your turn by setting the trap card and then normal summoning a card going into their board. And to be honest, I'm going to take that challenge a lot of the time and just try to interact with the monster before they can flip the trap. Like if they have Dormouse, right, I'm going to imperm the Dormouse on summon. If they have the trap, they're going to use the trap. They're going to banish their Dormouse to do whatever effect they're going to resolve. They're going to summon back the Dormouse. I'll just interact with it again. You know, as long as I can make sure it doesn't go through, they pretty much lose the game. The deck doesn't have that many extenders, and to be honest, the deck does kind of get interacted with by Nib pretty hard. There is always the combos that play through Nib, but they play through Nib to end on a half board. There's not too many combos that play through Nib to end on the full board. So I think this deck does have some loose conditions, but it also has so many great factors going towards it. Like the fact that it doesn't lose to D-Barrier. It can play Shifter, so it's automatically beating a lot of the Rogue matchups. It has pretty good consistency. And I think it's like has a high ceiling. You have a lot of room to outplay your opponent. If you're playing a mirror match with Risol, the better player is going to win. Or I'm sorry, a mirror match with Malice, the better player is going to win like 90% of the time. Moving on, we have Momento. I love this deck. Huge fan of this deck. I think this deck is absolutely insane. You resolve the combo, you're winning. You are not losing. I think I've maybe seen this board get broken one time, and it's because it was like triple board breaker into the board, you know? The only thing that this deck has going against it is Shifter. And there's going to be Shifter in next format, right? At least at the start, we're going to see Tenpai probably still playing Shifter. It might rotate out of the Tenpai decks early on. We don't really know yet. We're not in the format. But Malice will definitely be maining Shifter to start it off, right? And so I think that it's not a good time to play Memento. Even though I love this deck, I think for right now, we're going to put this away in our binders. May see it come back at a later point in time because this is one of the most insane combo decks. It plays through every hand trap phenomenally. Fuwalos, Purrely, Droll, all the floodgate hand traps almost do nothing to it. So you're able to play very, very well with the deck. But for right now, I just don't think it's the format for it. Mermail is a rogue deck. Straight up, this is just a rogue deck. It's really cool. Like having the ability to like basically FTK your opponent has always been cool. It's a little cringe. It's really, really cringe actually. But this deck has a lot of things going for it, but it also has a lot of things going against it. Number one being Shifter. But also, I think that this deck kind of just loses to hand traps. So any interactable hand traps early on, if they don't start with the Neptibus, kind of cook this deck. So if you have Ash, Imperm, Droll, even like going later into their turn, like a good nib into their board is going to do a lot of damage. And we're going to see a lot of hand traps being played into this next format. So I think that Mermail doesn't seem like the best choice to me, at least. Purrely, I'm going to put Purrely down here in tier 3. I was originally talking about this deck a couple months ago with Jonah Singer or JoJo ASMR He's a very good Australian player, and he loves his cat deck. My problem with the cat deck right now is that going into this format, you know you're going to be getting debarriered, right? Every person is going to have 3 debarriers in their side deck, and it's going to hurt. It's going to suck, right? The only thing that Purrely has going for it as opposed to other things, is that it still can access its extra deck without just Xyz monsters. But a lot of the time, it's just going to force you to go SP pass, which is not a winning game state. But Purrely does break boards very well, especially into the Malice board. Purrely is going to destroy that board most of the time. If there's no Floodgate, there's no if there's no debarrier, like you're destroying that board super easily. But it does lose to debarrier, so because of that, I'm going to put that farther down here in the list. Rescue Ace. Yeah, it's not the time. Not the time yet. I love this deck to death. If you guys didn't know, this is like one of the decks that I originally fell in love with. I was playing this deck before the Witch and Diablo Star even came out. And to be honest, this deck is very good. It has its problems. It has bricks, you know. It doesn't have that many starters right now. You get punished by a lot of extenders. And to be honest, I just don't really want to play this deck for anything in the foreseeable future until we get like more airlifters back and the format kind of slows down power level wise. Moving on, we have Ritual Beast. This deck sucks. I hate this deck. This deck is super cringe. Good news is that this deck loses a lot of power. When it doesn't have the ability to shifter you out of the game, it's only like real Floodgate, only real win condition, is resolving Protoss. If they don't shifter you and they don't resolve Protoss, I've never seen that deck win, ever. They could have the full like all-engine board if they want. You're still losing, you know? I think this deck is at best rogue, and the only thing that I think keeps it in the format is the fact that it doesn't get hit by shifter at all. In fact, shifter kind of helps it in some situations, but I still think this deck is pretty bad. Best deck, Risol. I know a lot of people have looked at this deck and they go, wow, that deck is really easy to play. That deck sucks. It's all Xyz monster, loses to debarrier, just doesn't have enough starters, it bricks. Yeah, sometimes it does. Every deck bricks sometimes, right? And you can like adjust your deck's math. You have additional starters you can play. You play Aratama, Small World, Desires, Prosperity, infinite things for right now to help supplement your deck's consistency. So it bricking is not really a main concern. Every deck has a Floodgate that's going to lose to. Just be happy that the Floodgate your deck loses to is a Floodgate that they have to draw when they go first. You know, it's not Fuwalos that your deck loses to. It's not Purrely. It's not Droll. It's not Shifter, you know? Be happy that your deck is only losing to a trap card and not one that can be activated from the hand. That's something that I think you should really focus on when playing this deck. But also, like, debarrier has outs. You are going to be playing Crossout in your deck. I don't like the card Crossout. I think generically Crossout is makes formats bad. When you're having to play Crossout, it makes it bad. But I really disagree in this format specifically. I think that it just helps insulate your plays, and it kind of acts as like an additional starter. Because all of your starters are going to get you to like the exact same thing. You know? So having Crossout basically acts as like a secondary extender in your deck. And I really like that, especially because Crossout has a lot of coverage to hit other matchups. You can not only use Crossout to hit Engine in a mirror match, use Crossout to hit non-Engine and non-mirror matches, but you can also like use Crossout to hit other matches. There's a lot of decks that play Prosperity. There's a lot of decks that play Desires. There's a lot of decks that play Bonfire right now. You know, being able to cross out a Bonfire against Snake Eye is absolutely phenomenal, turning your non-Engine card that's supposed to protect you into an offensive disruption. And because of that, I think the deck has a lot of insulation, and the mirror matches for this deck are a lot more complicated than you'd think. There's a lot of like niche interactions, and I feel like this deck very, very, very much rewards perfect technical play. So if you play better than your opponent, you will win. It feels like a bigger majority of the time, you know? I really like this deck. I think that if you are hating on this deck, you should really give it a chance before just saying it sucks, saying that it has loose conditions. Because, I mean, we can all be wrong, right? And it's not a bad thing when you're wrong. It just means that you changed your opinion. And it is what it is. This is the, like, Fiend Smith Snake Eye deck. I think this deck gets slightly better in the next format than it is now. Just because the Fiend Smith cards are really good into the grind game of Risol. Having that come back every single turn. However, I think the deck is still kind of weak. I think it's going to lose to Nibiru a lot, and Nib's going to be played more and more, because Nib plus any hand trap is going to do a lot of damage to the Risol board, as well as absolutely destroy the Malice board. Any hand trap in a Nib kind of just destroys Malice out of the game. But it's going to do the same thing versus this deck, and that's what I'm worried about. I'd put this in like the probably the best out of the tier 3 decks. I don't think I would personally play this deck, and that kind of goes for the Kashtira build as well. Both these decks just kind of lose to Nib, as well as like you are going to be able to hand trap this deck and stop it. There's not infinite extenders in the Snake Eye deck like there was previously. And because of that, like, you're going to notice a lot of time you're just going to lose in like a hand trap battle. But it does have good grind game for both these decks. I think it's something to take into account if you're like considering playing a Snake Eye deck still, to play one of these. The pure Snake Eye deck, though, however, I think is pretty unplayable. Just having enough hand traps in your deck, that was like the pro of this deck, is that instead of having like 5 Kashtira cards in your deck or 5 Fiend Smith cards, you replace those with 5 hand traps, and you just kind of hand trap your opponent. That's not going to work in the next format. Risol is simply just going to blow you out of the water, and it's not really going to be close. I also wanted to mention that for these decks all include the Azamina package. That's just kind of implied. But the Azamina cards were already bad into formats previously, going second. But specifically into Risol, you get destroyed. You activate Deception from your hand. You tribute a card from your hand. You go from 6 cards in your hand to 4, right? And they go, Detonator Effect, pop your Deception. And you just wasted 2 cards for 1 detach, you know? Pretty bad. So I just wanted to mention that real fast. This is the Millennium deck. The big old Unga Bunga guy. I don't really know what his name is. This deck's bad. I like Exodia just as much as the next guy. It's cool, but this deck's really bad. You should put it in your binder. Maybe sell it to the store at 10%. I don't know. Just get rid of it. Get it out of my sight. Pretty bad deck. All right. Tenpai. I'm sure a lot of you guys are going to be happy to hear this. I think Tenpai is going to drop down. Like, quite a bit. Tenpai wins, I would say, 20% of its games or so due to Shifter alone, right? If Shifter's not a win condition for the deck, I think the deck's going to lose a lot of its ability to win games. And losing the ability to win games just off of like a single non-engine card is going to hurt that deck's ability to win. It's going to hurt the deck's consistency. It's going to hurt its win rate, just straight up. I think that the decks also have very good matchups into Tenpai. If you'll notice, a lot of the boards that they're making in Risol, they end with either 1 level 4 or 2 level 4s, and they use the trap card and graveyard to exceed during your opponent's turn, right? What's really funny in that matchup is if they have Chandra and they have Pydra and they're going battle phase and they're swinging, you know? They go battle phase, you go activate the trap, they're going to make a Baguska mid-battle phase. They're not doing anything. Not a single thing. They go to main phase 2, they make a seals, and they pass. So having something like that's going to really hurt the deck. Not to mention, like, and the Malice matchup, the monsters are really hard to deal with, and the fact that they can all just like kind of float through the Tenpai bodies is going to be really, really impactful. And the non-target disruption in the battle phase is really good versus Tenpai, because it doesn't matter if they chain to Synchro on res, you're just going to banish whatever they summon. So that's 2 things going against the Tenpai deck, as well as Shifters just not being as impactful. Pure Kashtira, I think Pure Kashtira is the same thing. If Shifter doesn't hurt decks as much, then Kashtira is also going to hurt, because that's one of its main win conditions, is activating Shifter. So this deck definitely falls in power. Not much to explain there. I think this deck already sucked. It only won if it drew like one of its main deck floodgates. If they were like maining, if they were maining Skill Drain, if they were maining Shifter and they drew them, that's one of the only games that won. Or if you just like absolutely incredibly sacked them with Rise Heart. That's just not going to happen as much anymore. Lastly, the deck I want to talk about was Yubel. This deck is cool, right? I can show you guys replays later on. I think I'm going to post more matches on this channel just leading up into this new format. I know a lot of people are going to get ready for Anaheim YCS, as well as there's Orlando and Vegas all coming up. They're all going to be in the same similar type of format of Risol Malice. Yubel going into the Risol board, you're cooked. You normal summon Beckoning Beast pop. Gates pop. Nightmare Pain pop. The fact that we have an in-engine out to Nightmare Pain is so powerful. It's just going to destroy them. Not to mention, one interaction I wanted to mention is that if you normal summon Beckoning Beast and you go effect to add, you get Gates, and you activate Gates, you're going to lose instantly, because they're going to go activate the effective Detonator, detach Aggregator, they're going to pop your Gates, on res, Detonator is going to negate your Beckoning Beast, so now you don't even have the extra normal summon, and you lost your extender off of it. I think that Yubel has a really, really bad matchup into Risol, and because of that, it gets pushed out of the format. We'll see less Fuwalos getting played, I think, in the main decks, with like Risol being like the top deck. But I don't think it's enough to revive Yubel into the format. I think that Yubel is still better than some of like the Fiend Smith decks or the Snake Eye decks. So I'd probably put it like here as like the 6th best deck, but it's definitely not top 5. Not a tier 2, not a tier 1 deck. So honestly, guys, this is my opinion right here. If you want to try out this like tier list for yourself, I'm gonna put it in the description down below, like always. And if you guys had any questions for me, go ahead and leave in the comments down below. I usually interact with all my comments and let you guys know what I'm thinking. Again, the spreadsheet is coming out Friday the 29th. It's going to have everything in there. That's the day after Thanksgiving for those of you in the U.S. Pretty much it, though. I do really appreciate you guys watching the video. If you wouldn't mind commenting, and subscribing. But besides that, I just hope that you guys have a fantastic day. Bye-bye.